ABC General Hospital reveal that there are moments in Port Charles when danger does not arrive like a storm the whole city can see coming, but like a hand closing slowly around a throat, tightening so gradually that by the time anyone understands what is happening, breathing has already become impossible. That is the kind of darkness now swallowing Nathan, and what makes it even more terrifying is that the threat surrounding him is no longer limited to a single lie, a single cover-up, or even a single criminal alliance. What began as a desperate effort to protect Rocco has become something far more sinister, because Nathan is no longer simply making risky choices on his own. He is being maneuvered, watched, and controlled by a force so powerful that even men like Cullum and Sidwell, figures who have built their lives on manipulation and fear, are beginning to feel the ground shifting beneath them. In a city where everyone believes they understand who holds the power, the most dangerous revelation of all may be that Nathan has never truly belonged to himself. At first glance, Nathan's growing closeness to Lulu looked like the predictable result of guilt, loyalty, and the kind of emotional entanglement that Port Charles breeds so easily. He had positioned himself near her at the exact moment her life was most fragile, when her instincts as a mother were sharpening into something fierce and relentless, when Rocco's vulnerability had become impossible to ignore, and when the emotional wreckage surrounding their family had created openings that a man like Nathan could step into with careful precision. To Lulu, his presence could be read as support, perhaps even devotion, the quiet steadiness of someone willing to shoulder a burden no one else fully understood. But beneath that appearance was something far darker and far more unstable. Nathan was not simply trying to protect Rocco because he cared. He was trying to protect the boy because Rocco had become the center of a trap, and Nathan knew that if the truth ever broke loose, the child would be one of the first casualties. That knowledge did not make Nathan noble. It made him haunted. Every move he made toward Lulu, every calculated moment of tenderness, every effort to reassure her while withholding the full truth came from the same poisoned place, a man trying to stop a disaster he had already helped set in motion. The most terrifying shift in this story is that Nathan's fear is no longer about exposure alone, it is about obedience. Somewhere along the line, long before anyone in Port Charles noticed the strain in his face or the increasing desperation in his choices, Nathan stopped being an independent player and became an asset. The secrets connected to Cullum were never isolated, never accidental, and never as limited as they first appeared. They belonged to a chain of command much larger than anyone suspected, one that did not merely use Nathan for information, but shaped his access, his emotional relationships, and even his sense of duty. Cullum may have seemed dangerous because of what he knew, and Sidwell may have seemed untouchable because of the network he controlled, but both men were operating under an illusion common to predators. They believed they were close enough to the center to matter. What they failed to understand was that Nathan's true master had been moving pieces long before either of them realized there was another board. That revelation changes everything, because it means Nathan's connection to Lulu and Rocco was never entirely spontaneous. There may have been real feeling there, real guilt, real protectiveness, but those emotions grew inside a structure designed by someone else. Nathan was placed where he could watch, influence, and, if necessary, redirect the fallout from the secrets surrounding Cullum. He was meant to contain risk. He was meant to identify weaknesses. He was meant to ensure that if any hidden crime, alliance, or betrayal connected to Cullum ever surfaced, the damage could be controlled before it spread to the wrong people. But the problem with using a man like Nathan as an instrument is that he still has a conscience, and conscience is the one variable that makes any elaborate conspiracy unstable. The more time he spent around Lulu and Rocco, the more the assignment stopped feeling like a task and started becoming a form of self-destruction. Protecting them was no longer part of the plan. It was his rebellion against it. That is where the story becomes truly explosive, because once a controlled man begins making emotional decisions, everyone around him becomes vulnerable. Lulu is not just at risk because she is close to Nathan. She is at risk because she has unknowingly become the one person capable of destabilizing him. Her instincts, her grief, her fierce need to shield her son, and her refusal to stay passive in the face of danger make her a threat to the hidden architecture surrounding Nathan. The closer she gets to the truth, the more dangerous she becomes to the people who believe secrecy is survival. Rocco, meanwhile, is no longer just a child at the center of adult chaos. He is becoming a pressure point, someone whose safety can be exploited, whose fear can be weaponized, and whose existence can force Nathan into impossible choices. Nathan may tell himself he is protecting the boy, but in reality, he is standing at the edge of a nightmare in which every effort to save Rocco may push him closer to the very forces that could destroy him. The arrival of Nathan's true boss in Port Charles would not feel like a simple villain entrance. It would feel like the city itself had been infiltrated by a colder, more disciplined kind of evil. Sidwell thrives on intimidation. Cullum thrives on secrets. But this new power would thrive on control, and control is infinitely more dangerous because it does not need chaos to win. It needs patience. It needs leverage. It needs people whose weaknesses have already been mapped and cataloged. Nathan's boss would not come to Port Charles to create noise. He would come to restore order, the kind of order that leaves bodies behind but keeps the machinery running. His presence would instantly expose the fragility of men like Sidwell and Cullum, because both of them would realize that they are no longer dealing with an ally or a rival they can bargain with. They are dealing with the source. That is why the idea of Sidwell and Cullum both becoming afraid is so powerful. Men like that do not fear morality, and they do not fear consequences in the conventional sense. What they fear is irrelevance. They fear the moment they understand they can be replaced, erased, or sacrificed. If Nathan's true boss sees them as liabilities, their history of cruelty will mean nothing. Every dirty favor, every cover-up, every threat they use to maintain their power will suddenly become evidence against them. This creates a vicious new layer of tension, because both men would react the only way men like them know how, by turning more dangerous, more paranoid, and more brutal. Cullum would become desperate to secure his hidden secrets before they are used against him. Sidwell would lash out, trying to seize control of situations that have already slipped beyond his reach. In that panic, Nathan would be caught between the men who used him and the force that owns him, while Lulu and Rocco stand directly in the blast zone. One of the darkest turns in this storyline is the possibility that Nathan's effort to protect Rocco starts to look, from the outside, like manipulation. The more erratic Nathan becomes, the more Lulu may begin to question whether his closeness was ever real, or whether she has been letting a stranger too far into her life. That emotional fracture would devastate Nathan more than any external threat, because it would force him to confront the ugliest possibility of all, that even his genuine feelings have been contaminated by the role he was forced to play. He may love them in the only broken way he still can, but if every protective act is tangled up with secrecy, half-truths, and hidden allegiances, then love itself becomes difficult to separate from betrayal. That is the kind of emotional poison that destroys people from the inside. Nathan would begin this story believing he can carry the burden alone, believing he can lie just enough to keep everyone safe. But lies never stay at the size we invent them. In Port Charles, they grow teeth. Lulu's anger, when it comes, should not be gentle. It should be the anger of a woman who realizes she has once again been forced to navigate a world where men make secret decisions around her and then expect gratitude when they claim it was all done for her protection. That emotional beat matters because Lulu is strongest when she is not merely scared, but insulted by deception. If she learns that Nathan has been part of a larger conspiracy, that his presence around Rocco was shaped by hidden motives, or that he knew more about the danger circling her family than he ever admitted, her fury will be volcanic. Yet, what makes the conflict richer is that her anger will collide with a terrible understanding. Nathan may not be the architect of this nightmare, but he helped keep it alive. He may be a victim of control, but he is also a participant in the suffering it causes. That kind of duality creates the sharpest emotional wounds, because it denies everyone the comfort of simple innocence. Rocco's role in the story can become even more devastating if he begins sensing that the adults around him are unraveling. Children in Port Charles are often treated as symbols of what the adults are fighting for, but the most heartbreaking version of this plot would make Rocco emotionally aware enough to feel the shift before he understands it. He would notice Nathan's growing panic, Lulu's rising distrust, the strange atmosphere around every whispered conversation and every sudden absence. The fear surrounding him would stop being abstract and become personal. If he were put in direct danger, even briefly, it would ignite every buried instinct in Lulu and strip Nathan down to his rawest self. A man under control can follow orders. A man watching a child he cares about suffer becomes unpredictable. That unpredictability could be the one thing Nathan's true boss did not fully account for. And still, the deeper tragedy is that Nathan's boss may have anticipated even that. The arrival in Port Charles would not just signal danger for Nathan, it would signal a test. Can Nathan still be controlled now that emotion has made him unstable? Can Lulu be manipulated through fear? Can Rocco be turned into leverage without bringing too much attention to the larger operation? Can Cullum and Sidwell be contained, or have they become expendable? These are not the calculations of ordinary criminals. These are the calculations of someone who views people as components in a mechanism, valuable only so long as they remain useful. That is why this storyline has the potential to become so intense. It is not simply about crime or secrets anymore. It is about the destruction of agency. Every character begins to confront the horrifying possibility that many of their choices were never truly their own. The most gripping version of Nathan in this arc is not as a clean hero or a simple traitor, but as a man being torn apart by incompatible loyalties. He wants to protect Rocco. He wants Lulu to stay alive and untouched by the ugliness behind the scenes. He wants to keep the buried secrets surrounding Cullum from detonating before he can find a way to disarm them. But he is also bound to a system that does not forgive disobedience, and the longer he hesitates, the more likely it becomes that someone else will make the choice for him. That is why every step Nathan takes should feel suffocating. Every warning he cannot explain, every lie he uses to buy time, every attempt to redirect suspicion should push him closer to collapse. He is not walking through danger, he is being crushed between layers of it. As for Sidwell and Cullum, their terror should be richly deserved. For too long, men like them have treated Port Charles as a chessboard and everyone else as disposable pieces. Seeing them threatened by a larger darkness does not redeem them. It exposes the scale of the evil they willingly served. Their fear would not invite sympathy. It would sharpen the suspense, because desperate villains are capable of the ugliest acts. If they suspect Nathan may turn against them, if they believe Lulu knows too much, or if they worry Rocco's situation could expose the structure above them, they may decide the safest solution is elimination. That possibility should hang over every scene like smoke. Not because violence must happen immediately, but because once such men feel cornered, restraint disappears. In the end, this story works best as an emotional siege. Nathan is under control, yet trying to break free. Lulu is searching for safety, yet being drawn closer to the center of danger. Rocco is innocent, yet becoming the one life everyone is willing to use. Cullum and Sidwell are predators, yet suddenly vulnerable to a force even worse than themselves. And Port Charles, as always, is the perfect stage for a war built on secrets, because it is a city where love and manipulation often wear the same face until the final moment. The madness of this storyline lies in that unbearable tension between protection and possession. Nathan may believe he is fighting to save Lulu and Rocco, but the cruelest twist may be that the very effort to shield them is what marks them for destruction. If his true boss has finally come to Port Charles to reclaim control, then this is no longer just Nathan's nightmare. It is the beginning of a chain reaction that could shatter every fragile bond he tried to preserve, expose the rot behind Cullum's secrets, and force everyone involved into choices so ugly that no one will emerge unchanged.